constructed forms, so different and dependent on each other. Damn! Which is worse, success or failure? Let my theory be celebrated and abused, or reviled and rejected. Oh, it's bad enough that I may receive abuse, as Huxley has warned me. But that so many others might be abused in the name of my theory, or that my theory be mutated into something hideous. Or perhaps I can sort things out with Lyle's visit. Oh, what would I do without Lyle? Without all our illustrious predecessors? Grandfather Erasmus, Lamarck, Cuvier, Hutton. My book should be a step forward, another link in the great chain of ideas, each successive idea an advance. No, they're not all advances. Even some of my ideas have been wrong. So many gaps in my theory. And I have not solved the problem of the origin of variations. Still, this abominable volume clearly proposes that all species, all elaborately constructed beings, arose exclusively from natural processes acting around us. Find God where you may. There, I've said it. Oh, what will become of us? Well, I even come to hate myself.
Charles, Sir Charles is arriving. Sir Charles, good afternoon. It is so good of you to pay us this visit.
The pleasure is all mine, Mrs. Darwin, and Mrs. Lyle has sent this novel of Miss Austen's to you. It's one of her favorites, and she hopes that you'll enjoy it too. I trust you are well.
I am well, thank you. And tell Mary I am delighted with her gift. But I am worried about my Charles. May I have a word with you before you see him?
Why, certainly.
Charles has not been himself lately, especially over the last week. The last chapter of his species book is nearly finished. Now he can hardly bring himself to work on it. Oh, he tries to write, and then he tears up his work. I even fear he may destroy the manuscript. Last week I found the whole thing on the floor.
Oh, I'm shocked that he would be so distraught. His work is far too valuable to be lost or even delayed.
I have quietly removed a chapter at a time for copying, in case he continues in this manner. He has not yet noticed, and he does need a copy to send to Murray. It is most unlike Charles to act in this way.
Is he disrespectful of you all the children?
No, and not at all. To us he is his usual caring self, just very distracted. I was hoping you could convince him to finish the manuscript. He has such respect for you. Your words would have great influence with him.
My dear Mrs. Darwin, it would be my pleasure to assist him. Indeed, it's no effort at all, since I think so highly of your husband, his work in general, and this book in particular. I do hope I may be of some help, for his sake as well as yours.
I am grateful for your efforts, Sir Charles. And I'm sure my husband will be too once he comes to his senses. Charles! Sir Charles has arrived! I do hope he is civil with you. Please do not take offense if he has a sharp tongue.
One intemperate exchange shall not come between us. We've been friends for 20 years, and I'm looking forward to the next 20. Thank you for telling me about this.
Thank you.
Ah, my dear Darwin.
Hello, my dear friend.
I do hope that my visit isn't too much of an interruption.
Oh, not at all. I've been looking forward to your visit. I only fear that I won't be fit company.
Well, Huxley tells me your manuscript is all but finished. This is
Not quite. I'm on the last chapter, but it's giving me more trouble than all the rest put together.
Well, I'm sure you're under immense strain from all the hard work you've been doing, and you deserve a long rest as soon as you send it off.
I did not expect this. I'm not at all sure I can finish.
Oh, but finish you must, Darwin. Your work is far too important to remain in this study. It will have a huge impact on science and beyond.
Oh, that is what I fear, the disastrous consequences of my work. I can tell you this only because you're such a dear friend.
Your fears seem out of proportion to the accomplishment of this magnificent synthesis. My dear fellow, what are you thinking of? Huxley's diatribes on atheism. No need to worry about those. However convincing his arguments are, this world is far too full of care for people to throw out their need for God.
Oh, no, I can see that my theory will be ammunition in his debates, that it also can be turned towards terrible oppressions, as when some demagogue uses the struggle of individuals in nature as an instrument of the state, and uses my theory to justify tyranny.
That is an unpleasant prospect, Darwin, but it's only imagined at the moment. Any great idea can be used for good or ill. We cannot control our ideas once we send them off into the world. They're not children. We send them forth with our best intentions, not knowing if they'll bring joy or harm. Look, Darwin, here are the reasons for you to finish your manuscript as soon as possible. Are you listening?
I am listening.
First, if you don't publish your theory, someone else will. Or Wallace could send in another manuscript, or someone from the continent could. Your ideas have been in the air since we read your papers at the Linnean Society. They won't go away. Second is what I've already said. Your theory can be misused, but it can also be used for great good in plant breeding, in medicine, in understanding the history of life on Earth. Third, you deserve credit for all you've done to solve the species problem. So much more of nature makes sense in terms of a few natural laws. Now that is real progress. Fourth is a selfish interest. Your work will be of huge help to me as I complete my book on the geological antiquity of man. Dear old chap.
No, it is hard to object to such excellent arguments, and I won't even try. But still, my mind is tangled with the fate of my work. My dear Lyle, I am well aware that I could never have come this far without the support of my family and a few close friends, especially you. But how many times have I said to myself that half of my ideas come from your brain?
You're far too modest now. We've both shown huge advantages of applying the principles of uniformity to life's history. We've both embraced the Earth's endless past, future, but your work has opened up previously uncharted territory. Your work will motivate mankind to rethink, to discover, to wonder. Your theory gives us a new world.
I cannot accept such praise at the moment, but I will try to write again. And now, my dear friend, we must cut our visit short. My stomach is troubling me, and I do need a rest.
Oh, very well. But do write me when you've finished your book. I want to celebrate with you, or for you, whichever you will allow.
Thank you for your visit. I truly appreciate it.
Onward, my friend. Onward.
Then, move on to the fossil exhibits, followed by Darwin's experiments with plants. And finally, we'll move on to the museum gift shop, where the Darwin finger puppets and dolls are now on set.
Oh, can we go, Mama? Can we go to the...
So, here we have a recreation of Charles Darwin's study, with many elements from his actual study at Down House. The table, the books, and the microscope are all the same items that Darwin actually used. Now, most days, Darwin would work for several hours in the morning and in the afternoon, stopping to read the mail or the morning papers with his family, and just stroll around his thinking pad. This is where Darwin wrote The Origin of Species.
I finished it.
First published in 1859, The Origin of Species became one of the most influential books ever written. It had an immediate impact on scientists throughout the world and was widely read by the public in Darwin's day. The origin of species is the starting point for the modern theory of evolution, which has become the unifying concept for all of biology. Many of our exhibits support Darwin's theory of evolution. Let's move on to see those now, shall we? Come on, everyone. All you sitting down in the chairs, we're going to come on. Highlights from the fossil record, which supports Darwin's theory of evolution as stated in The Origin of Species. Let's move along to everyone's favorite part of the fossil exhibit, the dinosaurs. That's right. Everyone can move around. Take a look at it. It's all really interesting. Interesting, isn't it? Well, I think the Allosaurus probably did take out the... Can you imagine that? Yeah, that'd be pretty interesting to see. Can everyone gather around so everyone can hear me? It's kind of echoey in here. I want to make sure everyone can hear. Now, the name dinosaur was first coined by the great anatomist Richard Owen, and it means terrible lizard. Darwin claimed that all extinct beings belong to the same system as living beings. Even dinosaurs, so unlike any animals alive today, can be shown through comparison with other vertebrates to be more closely related to crocodiles than to lizards. And fossil birds discovered since the publication of The Origin of Species have shown that birds arose from a group of bipedal carnivorous dinosaurs. Actually, such as the one on the wall there. You want to take a look?
This is here.
Actually, fun fact, that idea was one of the only ideas that Owen and Huxley actually agreed upon. Now, over long periods of time, an ancestor and its descendants will be linked by intermediate forms, even when those descendants differ substantially from their ancestors. Now, when these intermediate forms were unknown in Darwin's day, he explained their absence by the imperfection of the geologic record. Let's take an example of whales, which are an example of missing intermediates in Darwin's day. How did whales evolve from a fully terrestrial animal, such as those specimens on the wall behind those guys, to the fully aquatic animal, such as the modern-day dolphin? Fossil whales discovered since the publication of The Origin of Species have provided the intermediate forms that Darwin predicted. Take the example of this fossil right here. You guys can move around, maybe some other people can look at it. There's some pictures underneath that are pretty cool to look at. Now, this fossil, Rhodocetus, which was found in Pakistan, has a long skull with rudimentary abilities to hear underwater. It had 4 legs, which are capable of supporting the animal on land. This animal was semi-aquatic. Now, this slightly younger fossil whale had a body 20 feet long. Its name was Doryudon, and it was found in Egypt. It has a long skull with many pointed teeth suited to catching fish. The front legs are modified as fins, while the hind legs are so small as to no longer play a role in propulsion. And in modern whales, the dolphin hanging out behind, the hind legs are gone altogether. And so, recent discoveries in the fossil record have provided the intermediate forms that Darwin predicted.
So, who's in charge here?
What do you mean, sir?
I mean, who's running this show? I mean, you can't tell me we are just a bunch of vibrating atoms. There had to be a great decider.
I'm presenting the scientific view based on...
I know. You think it's all a matter of chance? But I don't see how any of you can believe this evolution stuff.
It's not a matter of belief, sir. It's a matter of evidence. The more we study the fossil record, the more evidence we find for Darwin's theory.
Look, I am all for science, but you need to present the other view.
We're not here for a pitch about intelligent design.
That's a worn-out argument, George. You're missing a great opportunity.
Wait, what?
Would you let the tour guide finish?
I'm talking about the Darwinian view of human nature, that it's imperfect and always will be.
Huh? I'm not following.
Human nature is a product of evolution, and it can't be changed by social reforms.
Where did you ever get that idea?
The left has Darwin all wrong. Darwinian science sees our traditions, the nuclear family, private property, limited government, as rooted in human nature.
But evolution is godless and purposeless.
It is a theory about the tree of life.
Conservatives need Darwin.
Look, can we have this discussion somewhere else, please?
No.
I was talking about whales and dolphins. Today, there are over 80 species, including the largest animals that ever lived, and some of the most intelligent.
Isn't one of them extinct now? The Ivanitskiy river dolphin?
Yes, and the remaining river dolphins are critically endangered.
That's terrible. So many species that are disappearing.
We think we're so superior, but we're actually causing a tidal wave of extinctions.
She's right. 1 in 5 mammals and 1 in 3 amphibians are currently critically endangered. The number's even higher for marine mammals. We're losing entire branches from the tree of life.
Bleakness. Can this be real?
What difference does it make? I mean, most species are utterly useless anyway, and there are plenty of them left.
It does matter. Let me tell you why. First, they're all related to us. We're all related, so this is happening to your own extended family. Second of all, we depend on so many different species for food, medication, pollination, soil, and third of all, healthy ecosystems depend on many species interacting. And now they're falling apart. We're undermining our own future.
It's just survival of the fittest, perfectly Darwinian.
It's attitudes like yours that are causing this mess. We're all in it together.
Heck, there are winners and there are losers. We just happen to be the winners.
We need to move along. Just wait, please.
We need to care for our pig and for theirs, otherwise we'll all be losers.
Let's move along, please.
Life also of endless forms proceeding by natural selection is not secure at all. How grievous if our understanding fails to enlarge the importance of these, our fellow travelers on this immense journey. It's interesting to contemplate an entangled bank, clothed with plants of many kinds, with birds singing on the bushes, insects flitting about, and with worms crawling through the damp earth. To reflect that all these elaborately constructed forms, so different from each other and so dependent on each other, have been produced by laws acting around us. These laws being growth with reproduction, inheritance, variability, a rate of increase so high as to lead to a struggle for life, and consequently to natural selection entailing the divergence of traits for some and extinction for others. Thus, from the war of nature, from famine and death, the production of new forms, even the higher animals, directly follows. There is grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers, originally breathed into a few forms. And whilst this planet has cycled on from so simple a beginning, endless forms most beautiful and wonderful are being evolved. There. It's finished. It's finished.
Oh, Charles.
I finished it, my
Charles, do you
dear.
want to dictate a passage to me?
I finished the conclusion. I can send the manuscript off to Murray now.
Charles, I had no idea. Just now. This is wonderful.
Oh, this book has thrilled me and tormented me often at the same time.
It has had a difficult birth. And have a difficult life.
Oh, I could never have done this without you. I shall lean upon you to the end of my days.
Look, Parslow. Charles has finished his book.
Wonderful, sir. I know how much this means to me.
Oh, thank you, Parslow. Tomorrow, you can take it up to London. You're one of the few that I would trust with such a responsibility.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, Charles.
You're due for a holiday, sir. If you don't mind me saying so.
I could not agree more. Thank you, Parslow. Charles, do you need a rest? A walk? Lunch in town?
Turnabout the sandwalk would do me wonders. If you would come with me.
Of course, dear. And the children would love to come along. Horace, Leonard, Etty. Boys, calm down. We're going for a walk to celebrate the completion of your father's most important book.
Congratulations, Father.
Thank you, Matthew.
I'm sure it will have a great impact. What will your next book be? The boy, the partridge and the pear tree, the orchid and the orangutan.
Any one of those things. After I recover from this one.
What a tortured project this book has been. What's this?
Man, a wonderful man, is no exception. Oh, Lord. This is just the beginning.
there are restrooms located in Women's Room downstairs. Precisely what his schedule was during those last 2 weeks. But we do know that that his wife and that particular daughter helped him in exactly the ways that we portrayed, that he did raise pigeons, that his manuscript on geographic distribution sent to his beloved colleague Hooker was lost in the way that the play indicated, although he did have an original copy of it, so that it wasn't lost completely. It's just that the only alternative copy was lost at the time. And we do know that Darwin was concerned about how society was going to receive his ideas. So between that and his Victorian contemporary, Charles Dickens, whose wonderful and famous story, A Christmas Carol, also has 3 dreams in which people are wrestling with ethical issues, gave me the idea of having Darwin have 3 dreams, but now all set in the future. And so all 3 dreams are also based on historical events, but they're events all that he would not know about. He would know a little bit about, or have some glimmer of an idea about the Huxley-Wilberforce debate because he knew all the people involved. But of course, he'd have no knowledge of what was going on in Europe in 1935, and he would have no idea what an exhibit about him was all about in 2009. And but these were ways to illustrate how society has used and abused Darwin's ideas. And this is not the only scientific idea that has had this kind of reception or treatment, but it's the one that is that I am closest to, and the one that therefore I decided to invest some time in. And so I had the idea probably a good 15 years ago, and just being busy with more normal scientific activities, I didn't ever get around to putting it on paper, but I had talked to Kate about it because we cross paths a lot, and I love the theater, and she has done some fantastic environmental theatrical work. So finally, when the evolution theme semester was coming up, she said, you know, this is the year. You've got to do it. And so
because there's money to be
well, partly because there would be money to help support production.
The struggle for existence. You have to find grant money. It's like scientists.
Well, also we knew we would have a more interested audience. There would be a lot of focus on it. And so we initially taught a script writing class, and that's how I came to the class with my ideas. I had never written a play before. I said, help me turn this into something that makes sense to an audience. And Kate said, conflict. Everything has to be conflict. So, you know, only moments of polite conversation before so many people have to start arguing about something. So we had to figure out how to make conflicts, put conflicts into everything. And then the dreams were less difficult because, as far as their theatricality, because they're very dramatic, as they're meant to be very dramatic. So Kate really was the midwife to this process, and this whole process, and I learned a tremendous amount about writing from her, and she gave me a huge amount of guidance, as did the students in the class. So one semester was devoted to writing it, and then another semester was devoted to putting it on. And that was in 2006, and then we decided to recreate it this year because it's the Darwin bicentennial, and the various events are being put on about Darwin all over the world. And this seemed as though, because we had this interest and we had this wonderful museum and the cooperation and tremendous support from the exhibit museum, it seemed like a great reason to do it again.
And we have involved all new people with the exception of Mr. Wilberforce and Mr. Lyle, who were in the original. Oh, and Michael, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
you would play Morris. No, you weren't in it in 2006. But Michael played Osip's part. So he has graduated to the older.
Right, next time we'll play Eddie.
Cross-dressing. Yeah. But I do want to say one of the things that I thought was wonderful is when we worked on it in the script writing class, we didn't get to the third dream. And the third act, we knew about the scenes with Lyle. She was very, she knew she wanted those series of conversations to happen with Emma and Lyle and Charles Darwin and Lyle. But she wasn't sure about the last dream. And so the final assignment for the course was to write the last dream. And so actually the idea of it being set in a museum, wasn't that generated or
We had that
suggested?
already, but we had the students came up with a number of ideas of how we could work with that.
So I thought that that was wonderful, that they really got to contribute to the development of the piece. And certainly there's a lot of experimentation that happens when you do a new play. And the challenge of trying to understand what that world was like, from how do you walk in crinoline and sit down in crinoline, and how do you, sort of the polite behavior of Victorian society, speaking with a British accent, and things like that. And then everyone makes a contribution. This year, when we've done it, Irina, who played the gypsy woman, was so good as to really research the Romany language, which the gypsies would have spoken. And I think that added a terrific amount of realism and power, and that was really her idea and her work. So, every time you do a play, different actors and do different things, and certainly we worked with a student actor on Darwin in 2006, and it was a great privilege to have Martin have the time to devote to playing Darwin, and because he is closer to Darwin's age, and a little bit.
Now he's dead.
Yeah, it seems very much alive. But also, I don't know how many of you got the chance to see Martin play Galileo in the spring at the residential college.
Right.
He's doing a special class on brilliant, misunderstood scientists, and taking on Charles Darwin. I think was something that we did beautifully.
So, do you, Martin, have any thoughts about the elected year, about the challenge and of taking on the role of Darwin, or what you think or why you think it's worthwhile to do this kind of dramatization?
Your comments about trying to find the conflict in Darwin is a person who avoided conflict as much as possible. And it's hard to make a dramatic figure out of somebody who's trying to disappear into the wallpaper. So that was a challenge, especially after Galileo was just the reverse. Flamboyant and sarcastic,
Right.
Larger than life figure. But the core of the character in the play is his real dependence on the family. And that I hope was interesting and came across. Maybe I would like to see just a little more benevolent tyranny in the paterfamilias. He seems to really, he didn't crack the whip, he just had to do that, and they would all fall in line. I'm not sure that there was much family conflict within the family. The family seemed to be completely like a clockwork that was all wound up around his concerns, and it just ticked over.
Yeah. Well, certainly the biographies suggest that, and Emma was a big part of that. They were rather permissive parents. Those Victorian upper landed gentry went, and they let their kids play all over the halls and the drawing room and the study, and in fact, in the way, and the kids would come in and roll things around on the floor while Darwin was working, according to the scholarly biographies that I've read, and they partly because of that, apparently just had a very harmonious and very close family, and 3 of the children died. One at the age of 2, another close to that, and then Annie, the young woman who was their oldest daughter at the age of 9, and the play opens on the anniversary of her death, which was very painful for Emma and Darwin, Charles Darwin, throughout their lives. They were very fond of her, and lost her to tuberculosis, which was common, unfortunately, at that time. But it hung heavily over them. And there is some of Darwin's correspondence suggests that he began actively to doubt the existence of God at that point, because he couldn't understand why a loving God would allow this kind of thing to happen. And then just found more and more examples that were consistent with that. So it was very...
They had 10 children. They lost 3, but there were 7. We did not include all of the ones who would have been home at that time. And our set is too small. But I think that family life, I mean, I think what intrigues me, especially in the second act with the pigeons, is that children do ask questions, and you do have to answer them. And, his children, inadvertently or not, are raising the very issues that Darwin he doesn't want to see, but knows they're there. And that is the way I think that Catherine is beautifully prepared for those dreams, all the elements of unrest in Darwin's unconscious. And certainly the idea of selective breeding, what Leonard says, what you say, Michael, about do they ever prevent people from breeding? And he goes, not in England. Of course, this doesn't happen in England, but it's something which did happen to a horrific degree, and in many ways is a very pervasive so I wanted it to be a really claustrophobic experience for the audience. I didn't want it to happen far away. I wanted it to happen right there, and that you had to witness it, and you also had to hear and see what it was doing to the community that Irina's character was part of. And so that was important for me. The idea is that these are human faces, the theory,
I'd be interested in Fred, whether you had any thoughts or want to say anything about the play, because I know you teach Darwin, and he's actually now teaching, even though he plays Bishop Wilberforce, he's now teaching a course about the history of atheism.
Right, the bishop would not have liked my playing this role. So during the day I was teaching atheism, then I would come to rehearsals, and I would be
cross in your hand.
But yes, so I also taught Darwin. It happened this year, obviously connected with, of course, with atheism. And I've been so struck how in this play there's a kind of perfect melding between Darwinian theory and the theater. This is what I thought was so extraordinary. Because when I first heard that Catherine was going to write a play, I thought, well, I know she's a paleontologist, and so the writing a real theater piece takes a special kind of talent, which obviously she very much has. By the way, you might be interested in knowing something more about the bishop. The speech occurred when he was age 55. He became extraordinarily distinguished as a clergyman in England. He became the chaplain to Prince Albert. He entered the House of Lords. He was killed at the age of 86 from a shock suffered when he fell from his horse. And when Huxley heard this, he said, somewhat unkindly perhaps, but also somewhat rather cleverly, he said, Bishop Wilberforce's brains at last have made contact with reality to a fatal result.
That is really mean.
Well, speaking of Huxley and Wilberforce, I should say that almost all of their lines came from their own separate reviews of The Origin of Species that were published the year after Darwin wrote the play. There is, unfortunately, no transcript of this very famous debate. There are accounts of it in letters, mostly written by women to each other, women who were there to friends and family who were not there, and that's where some of the quotes, you know, are you related to an ape on your grandmother's side or your grandfather's side? That comes from letters. And so we have, but we don't know whether those are apocryphal or whether those were actually spoken. But they are so good that how can we omit them? But the amazing, I mean, I have to say that both of these gentlemen are tremendous orators, and it was, I realized it would be tragic to try to improve on their own writings because they spoke with tremendous clarity and tremendous use of language. And they were both very famous for this in their own time. And Wilberforce was known as a great orator, and Huxley was a professor and gave a lot of public lectures, and a lot of public lectures to people who couldn't afford to attend any kind of school. And so he was able to talk on a wide range of topics, and was just a terrific writer and a terrific speaker.
Has Darwin himself participated in these debates?
No, Darwin didn't attend. He didn't attend. He rarely left his house after he and his wife moved down in southeast of London. And occasionally he would go to London, maybe once or twice a year, but he would not go for these big brouhahas that were going to involve confrontation. He would go to receive an honorary degree, to be recognized by the Royal Society, that sort of thing. And even that he did reluctantly, but most of the time he stayed home.
One thing that we don't really have a note on in the program is he's referring to his wretched stomach. And he was chronically ill. And after his voyage on the Beagle, which was when he was a young man in his 20s, right, he contracted some kind of parasite. I mean, nobody really knows what it was, but he had severe stomach pain for the rest of his life. And he did have these enforced rest periods set on him by his wife. And so that was Catherine's idea about the napping, that rather than these things happening at night, that these were these rests in the day. But it was, again, this idea that he was never very well, and I'm sure that did affect his personality and his ability to, you know, he internalized a lot of conflict. He already had the problem, but I think the tension of his, you know, the anxiety exacerbated his physical problem and made it more difficult for him to work.
I have a question first to hear what those ideas, allegedly, Darwin's ideas that you put into this thing with gypsy, were they written letters? They're definitely not the origin of species. Is there somewhere in his right foreseeing those dangers?
The ideas of controlled breeding certainly emerged not from him, but from relatives, members of his own extended family, later in his lifetime, and he was not a supporter of those. One might note that he was not an extremely outspoken critic of those, but he did state very clearly in his own writings that it was his view that at least in English society, the breeding should be limited. That line actually comes right from one of his letters, that we should use that it is the improvement of reason and learning and not restriction of breeding that are the way to advancement of society. And so he did, at least those are his words. But some of the lines that are used in the doctor, as she is performing the sterilization, are actually one line is a quote from Nietzsche and one line is a quote from Hitler. And Nietzsche did study Darwin and was inspired by him, and then Hitler was inspired by Nietzsche. And so there is an intellectual series of connections that go back to Darwin. And then, there's some other uncomfortable facts too. Horace grew up to be the president of the British Eugenics Society. So these
Can I say, just come to the defense of Nietzsche?
He's my Nietzsche man.
Right, because I'm also giving a course on Nietzsche.
Yes, please.
Nietzsche said, in fact, the most decadent race in Europe was the Germans. And he loathed the Germans. He felt they were profoundly ill. He thought the most healthy race in all of Europe were the Jews. And he said the only way that the Germans could avoid continued decline was that all German officers should be forced to marry Jewish women, and this would then improve the health of the race. Now, of course, the Nazis did not like that, and they simply dropped that out of his works.
Was the idea of hybrid vigor recognized?
Excuse me?
Was the idea of hybrid vigor recognized at that point, or was it just making up?
Hybrid vigor?
Hybrid vigor, yes, but the idea is
crossbreeding.
Yes.
Well, I mean,
breeding out to make up.
I don't know. Well, Nietzsche never used that term.
Or, you know, there was a lot more genetic work being done at that point. So it would have been known scientifically, whether it's known to me, I'm not sure, or I don't know.
And if that had really happened, how the history would change.
Any other questions or comments?
Did he experience the kind of anxiety about finishing the book that you expressed here?
Probably not exactly as I expressed it. He did experience a lot of anxiety, and it was more over this book than it was over his others. He experienced eczema attacks. He, in fact, I even was rereading part of Janet Brown's biography, and she noted that some from her historical work, that he grew this huge beard that is the iconic Darwin, partly to cover his terrible complexion. And it was also after completing Origin of Species that he really aged tremendously. He went from being a recognizably kind of young or vigorous middle-aged man to the kind of the more hunched and serious and contemplative, and almost more kind of dark with a kind of often a very serious and worried look, as opposed to the more pleasant, unconcerned look that you see in a lot of younger portraits. So there is the sense that he really was worried about this.
And he did call it his abominable.
He did, absolutely.
That's
he
what
did.
Yes.
Brother, maybe you could play up even more in that act. This almost fear of finishing it. And then suddenly the loss of a chapter in which finally we see him break out in anger. You know, really, I mean, these mixed feelings are so intense there. Yeah.
Well, that's a good point to bring out, Hugh, because he actually, I mean, on the other hand, there's no question he was extremely proud of this work, and he also felt that he had discovered something new, and that it was, he was very convinced that while not every loose end could be neatly tied in this work, that he really did believe it. And so I think he was highly motivated by wanting to get this out there because he thought it really was a big improvement on people's previous insights. So it is very much mixed emotions that he has. That on the one hand, he's extremely proud that he calls it his child at times. And he is, and in fact, part of the 20 years of finishing it was so that he could make it they really wanted to be outstanding. And then he also, I mean, I think there's no doubt that he really wanted those ideas attributed to him. He was very concerned about this episode with Wallace, and they handled that in a fairly reasonable way. And Wallace was never bitter about it. In fact, Wallace was very grateful to the fact that their ideas got presented together, read by Huxley and Lyell, actually, at the Linnaean Society in the year before. And that's what started Darwin on actually writing The Origin of Species, as opposed to a much longer and actually, in all honesty, a much more tedious volume that would not ever have gotten read as widely as Origin of Species did.
But as I think of it, the idea of turning Darwin loose in this museum and making those discoveries, that was sort of brilliant. I'd love to have been around where that happened, you know.
Well, it was also wonderful because we came up with it sort of at the last minute, just before the play opened. And Catherine was the tour guide because we needed somebody who really knew this museum. And she does. And I thought that was a lovely piece of meta theater, to have the playwright explaining all of the connections to this museum. Yeah, it was absolutely right.
Don't know the details.
Yeah, well, you can see that there are a lot of constraints in doing it in a place like this. The lighting and the sound are not, but on the other hand, the opportunities are amazing too. So,
Well, I wanted to ask a question about the media by which the message should get out to more people, because obviously there's a lot of media about Darwin's the bicentennial, and we hear about the debate, the creationism debate, and the evolution debate a lot. But there's still a lot of people that are not very well informed, and that also cannot argue their side, whichever side they take, with facts or conviction, really, even like we had the debate out in the rotunda there. So I was wondering whether the students and actors as well feel that a play like this is the most effective medium, or an effective medium to communicate with a lot of people, or whether a play like this should really be turned into a movie. But the idea being similar with the full force of Technicolor or whatever you can put behind the historical reflections on this might be a nice way to reach more people. I mean, how would you, if you're convinced that the message should be getting out and the story of Darwin's weighing all these dilemmas is effective, how should it be shared with more people? I think the idea of having it in a play is a great idea. Of course, I'm biased because my majors are ecology and theater, but I really think that theater can be used to make an interesting statement about science. And I think this play is really great, not only because it's in the museum and it's introducing people to a museum, so people who may not normally come in at least to see a few exhibits, but also to give a face to Darwin, because we always hear about Darwin as the origin of species, it's Darwin, but we really get a personality here. We get a man, we get his struggle, and knowing the struggle, I think, gives more credibility to his theories. And I think being able to see it in the theaters can be very powerful and influential. Whether we can get beyond 65 people a night for a weekend is a whole other question, but I know there's interest in, you said Cornell, right? Or elsewhere that they want to do this play, so I think it could be a good way to...
Catherine is hoping to publish the play, which I think is a great idea, and send it out, and hopefully there'll be university productions, maybe professional productions. Yeah, I mean, we'd love to travel to New York and do the History Museum or the Field Museum in Chicago, but I don't know that that's going to happen. Yeah.
Theater is still a medium where this sort of thing happens. Years ago, Michael Frank's play Copenhagen. You had Niels Bohr and Heisenberg on stage going at each other. Moral questions, scientific questions.
Right.
And the live theater is the place where that can really happen. I was just hearing on the radio today Sarah Ruhl's play called Vibrator Play, which is female orgasms being induced in 19th century medicine. It's not going to happen on television. It's not going to happen in magazines. This theater is still a place where thinking can happen.
What do some of the other students think about that? Those of you who are in the theater a lot. Mr. Huxley? Yeah. I mean, thoughts about whether this kind of subject is good for the theater, or it would be better in another medium?
It's a rare opportunity to just humanize science. And that's why I like the writers so much more powerful. You have a human being. It's not there's no distance. So you're in a closet. You're washing.
Yeah, right. You're breathing the same air as the actors.
You know, I was thinking that maybe if this kind of media would have a real audience, but it's ideal such a matter for radio play. Yes, when people listen, it used to be very popular genre, but and it is really, I believe, they put a lot of impression by voice, a lot of passions put there. It's difficult to express.
Yeah, some of that could be that, the visuals are important in certain, it would be a different kind of challenge, but it would be interesting.
feel like the space in this play that is particularly relevant is because the visual aspect of the fossil record really kind of underpins that anthropometric comparison, the fossil record, are the fundamentals that Darwin was drawing up to formulate this theory. And I think that really synthesizes really well this play with the contemplation of the future figure, because we aren't even talking about embryology. We're not talking about modern genetics, molecular clocks, or anything else that advances with greater certainty in some ways, anyway, the existence of evolution. So
Yeah, in fact, I
this
actually
space
had to
really-
try pretty hard not to include those in the tour. There were all sorts of things I could have included that I deliberately chose to leave out because it would be too jarring to start hearing about molecular evolution, what it said about the origin of birds, or even whales for that matter, because it would make no sense to Darwin. It should make no sense to Darwin at all, and so that's why I had to.
But I think it strengthens the whole argument because it says you can have this theory without these special situations.
Well, I think that the tension between this Victorian society and the lace curtains over fossils, you know, I mean, it's this idea that the reality of Darwin's, his discovery is sort of peering in through the window, and you can put a curtain over it, but it's still there. And so the
But
same
here we
thing.
seem to have a coral reef, that's all.
In fact, it's right out there ready to sweep us away.
Well, that's it. Yeah, we had a little curtain, a little Swiss curtain there, but it's all looming. It's all there. So, yeah, no.
I want to say a few words about this performance because I was involved in this production from the very beginning, from the day which Katin started to introduce his idea to Kate, and they started to work together. It was 3 years ago, and till now it's a very, very long way, very hard way, and I think it's a great way because I think the today performance is a perfect production. And then I want to add something about the performance and about the idea. You know, in theater, there is a discussion about how theater could have a play without love. Because all the play with love only, and based on love relationship. Do you understand what I'm talking about? And in Russian theater, this discussion was about 200 years. Could play be without love or no? And you know, we saw, or maybe you know about Boris Godunov, Pushkin, which was 6 years ago from Russian theater.
In Ann Arbor.
In Ann Arbor. They did this performance in Ann Arbor. And it was one play where love has a very small, only one scene, 24 scenes, and only in one scene was relationship which introduced love between men and women. And because of this, this play was not on stage during 2 centuries. Then Gogol tried, I don't know how to translate this in English, revizor. Who knows the translation? It's inspector.
Inspector, yeah.
It was play which Gogol decided to make without love. And he could not avoid this piece. He included love. You know, and nobody knows how to make play without love. And when I try to introduce Katrin script, all the time I tell, like to Michael, for example, come and participate in this performance because this performance is not about love.
But it is about love. It's about family.
It's no, Kate. I'm talking about love between men and women, about love between people of different, yes, romantic idea. And I would like to tell you that I think this is a very great idea of Ecosophian theater, which Kate doesn't like this title, but this is Ecosophian theater where a script production, which when drama and director's idea move from what's inside of the play. You see how strong connection is between the script and this museum. Could you understand that this play could happen in any other place? Right now, I think everyone is sure that only this play is good. This place is good for the play. Yes? Tell me, please, yes or no? Do you agree with me or not?
No, you have the visual effects. You have
Yes,
the effects.
yes. This is a more important thing, and I think that it's a big, it's a very important thing that everything goes together. The set, the museum idea, the play idea, the Darwin's idea, all together means performance. And I think this means theater. Theater which could involve